It's not in the face! Thank you.
Hello and welcome to Hey Not the Face with your host John Nash and your producer me, Steffi Haynes. And in today's episode, we have a focus on a Brazilian court case that has flown under the radar for months. But we've got the documents that reveal details of the relationship between fighter managers and the UFC. Now, you will notice on our post that there is a paywall. We always have a paywall in our regular shows on the audio portion as well. And behind that, we are going to be going over WhatsApp messages between an MMA manager and UFC matchmaker Mick Maynard. And in the post, we're actually putting behind the paywall the PDF of those WhatsApp messages. John, how many pages is it?
That material is 42 pages of material, 42 pages of WhatsApp messages.
Oh my goodness. I feel like we're sitting on a treasure trove. Now, we do have some other content that we're looking at. The big Paramount Plus price hike that goes into effect next week, and why Canadian fans will still have to buy UFC pay-per-views. We're also going to talk about Vice TV's newest foray into combat sports with their latest, I won't call it an acquisition, their partnership being with LFA. Now, we have a lot more stuff that we're going to cover, so we're going to get down to business here in just a moment. But first, John, how the heck are you?
Fairly good. My neck hurts a little bit because goddamn potholes in LA are ridiculous. So I gotta examine the front end of my car tomorrow when I get out, because I cannot believe how bad the potholes have become in Los Angeles. At least, maybe not the whole city, but the route to my work and back, yeah, the potholes are just horseshit.
Yeah, I'm going to go out on a limb and say all those fires and all that extreme weather y'all have is tearing up your roads.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, the rain and stuff, it does a lot of damage to LA roads, because people aren't aware that LA, we're dry most of the year, but then when it rains, it really comes down, and we have like no system of runoff, so it just floods the roads. But even then, it's like we have. I spend a third of my year, I live in Minneapolis or Minnesota, right outside Minneapolis, and that gets tundra cold and super hot in the summer. So the buckling of the road, you should have much worse potholes. LA is something amazing. And the last year, especially, I mean, we were talking like trenches. You almost have to stop and say, are you guys like are you laying new plumbing pipes here? Is this sewer pipes being laid in, some electricity, something? Because no way should there be a hole that big in the middle of the road. So, and I'm not a complainer to road construction. I love modernity. I love having roads. I love having plumbing. I love having power. I love, so anytime there's road construction work, I will not complain. So I guess what I'm saying is I will not complain if LA gets out there and fixes some of these roads, because it is something, it is a sight to behold how deep these potholes are.
Ugh. Well, now that we have cruised through the deep impact of LA's roads, we're going to get into our show. Now, we always start with UFC antitrust case news, and even when there's not news, I'm going to ask John if there's news. So, John, has there been any new filings or any kind of movement in the UFC antitrust cases?
Well, I guess we could talk about the antitrust case, even though I would like to talk about the road condition in LA a little longer. But no, we will go to the antitrust case. There was some news. Now, remember, we brought this up last episode, and there was a status conference held on Tuesday. And this status conference was basically, I think the entirety of the status conference, my understanding, I had to, again, no media that I know was there. I had to call and ask everybody that was in attendance, and witnesses and attorneys and everybody there. And apparently the entire status conference, not the entire, but the majority of the status conference had to do with the upcoming evidentiary hearing on plaintiff's motion for spoliation sanctions. And so they confirmed during this status conference we had Tuesday that there will be a scheduled hearing live testimony from UFC President Dana White first, and then Vice President of Talent Relations, Tracy Long. She will be second. That'll take place on February the 4th and 5th. So I plan on being in attendance there. So I will report when that happens. And some of the interesting things that apparently happened was that the judge had some findings on the spoliation, that Judge Boulware explicitly found sufficient indication of spoliation to justify the evidentiary hearing because the defendants, with their motions, with their filings, apparently were not 100% certain that the judge was going to find it necessary to have this hearing, and he, I think, shot that down. He noted that there was years of missing digital messages, i.e. text messages from White, Long, and others related to the relevant fighter contract negotiations. These messages were subject to a litigation hold that had been in place during the relevant period, and so they should have been preserved, but were not produced despite prior obligations. So you can understand why the judge perhaps was not super happy about that. The missing evidence is deemed clearly relevant to the case because, again, they have the example of the previous case and how that material was used specifically in that case. And the judge cited it in the class cert. And also, I think during the hearing, I'm not 100% certain, but I think during the hearing, he even brought up that this was important information that he found important when he made his ruling. And so he would like to have it again. And so the court order regarding discovery for the spoliation hearing, the defendants must produce a privilege log covering all communications from 2014 to present. Communications involving attorneys may be logged as privilege. So in other words, attorney-client stuff, they have to be logged specifically. So it's not just handed to the plaintiffs that I guess someone else can go through it and see if it's relevant or not. Non-attorney communications, those not involving counsel, are not privileged and must be produced directly to the plaintiffs. The defendants must submit the privilege log and all underlying documents to the court in camera, I guess. I'm not sure might know what that means, but and the deadline for this is January 26th. The defendants did object, saying, hey, this is a lot of material. And the Judge Boulware, my understanding, was not very moved by that defense because, hey, you've had a lot of time and it shouldn't be that hard. It's yes or no. And in addition, there's the expected testimony. There's some questions of the conference appears to be involved. The conference, I should say, appears to have involved extended oral arguments during this class status. And there was no final resolution on the spoliation motion itself. But the evidentiary hearing in February will address whether sanctions are warranted. Now, people might not remember that is regarding the motion by the plaintiffs, arguing that the judge should introduce some sanctions on the defendants for failing to hand over this material. And so we will probably get an understanding if there will be any further actions by the judge after the hearing in February, after the testimony by Dana White and Long.
Wow. That's a lot. You said a mouthful.
Yes, it was apparently it was a full day that they were there during this status conference. It was a long, fruitful status conference. And I don't know if you remember, what was it, Kristen, the Twitter baby that Dana White used to have?
The Twitter baby.
There was a woman that he called his Twitter baby or something that handled all of his social media accounts back years ago. And I don't know if she still works for him or not. In an interview, but she made an appearance at they discussed that briefly, I guess, at the hearing. But I am not at the status conference recently. But I am not quite certain. When the word Twitter baby came up, I found that interesting. But I don't know if anybody understood who that person was.
Yeah, I bet nobody knows.
Yes.
Oh, goodness. All right. Well, let's keep trucking right along here because Sean Strickland said that he was pressured into taking the Dricus du Plessis fight while recovering from a shoulder injury. Now, this is the rematch. And he said that, and I quote, You don't say no to the UFC. They're our pimps. You don't say no to the master. I was backed up into a corner taking that fight. I got to get your take on that.
Well, I mean, yeah, that's kind of true. He's speaking the truth. We've talked about that for a long time. We have the whole previous Lee versus Zuffa case, and discovery in that was messages where basically the matchmaker, Joe Silva, mostly at that time, laid out the law to a lot of fighters that you do not turn down fights. In fact, he has specific, there's a whole series of messages where he basically told fighters, literally told fighters, you do not turn down fights. If you don't like the fight I'm offering now, you won't like that. You'll hate the next fight, or you'll like it less. I mean, there's several messages like that. So what he's saying is not new. And that's, one good thing about Strickland's terrible, I'll say anything gimmick is in times like this, sometimes he speaks the truth where other fighters would shut their mouth. And so for the UFC, which has profited off him saying whatever shit comes out of his mouth, well, this is what they have to put up with as well. Whatever shit comes out of his mouth. Some of it's honest and some of it's just nonsense. But in this case, he's speaking the truth. Now, will they care? I'm not sure they will, because, it's no threat to their business. I don't know how it damages them. We all are aware of this already. And for Strickland, what power does he really have? He's, he has to play nice. I'm not sure he's demanding a lot of extra money or anything in a contract. So I'm sure they will just accept it and say, oh, that's one of the crazy things Strickland says. But in this case, he is, it's not, if you're a listener to the show, I am sure you're fully aware that this is the way the business works, that there's no new information being conveyed by Strickland here.
Not to mention, Sean Strickland is basically the king of the apex. He doesn't carry a whole heck of a lot of weight as far as putting eyeballs on their product, putting asses in seats. So I don't think it matters in that regard either, correct?
Well, I'm not going to say he's not. Compared to most fighters in the roster, he's a star, right? He has, we've chronicled, we've been surprised by it, but he has a fan base out there. There's people have said when they go to these events that there are people that line up to ask him questions, that he has a fan base out there. We see on social media, he gets some traffic. Now, being a fan base, though, that's tiers below like Adesanya, who could sell pay-per-views and sell tickets, or John Jones, we know, draws, there's a lot of eyeballs, or, there's levels to stardom, but of known fans and also the type of fans CFC attracts, I would say he is in the upper tier of attractions in the UFC, but he's not a massive draw, especially because he doesn't hold a title. The title elevates you to another. It's a multiplying effect. There's can be some interest in you, and then you have a title, there can be a lot more interest in you. And he does not have a title, and his fan base, even though he's drawn this fan base, it's not like, certain other, it's not Max Holloway, I think, and certain other fans where those guys will pay much more to see him. That they have a fan base that will travel with them, where his, truthfully, and this is, almost seems like cliched, but his is probably like 13 to 15-year-old angry young boys. And those guys don't have a ton of money to spend. They might draw eyeballs, they might bring more interest than other fighters, but it's not the type of guys that are moving expensive tickets.
Well, that's kind of what I was saying. He's not the one that's really putting the asses in the seats, right? Yeah,
the seat wise. Well, again, he brings some, I think we have some evidence that he does sell some tickets, some movement, but again, he's not the big star. Let's just put it that way. He's a bigger attraction than most fighters in the UFC, but not a big star.
Now, our friend Rob Nashville reminded us just a couple of days ago on Twitter of the price increase for Paramount Plus that's happening next week. And the hike will see the annual plan, and it's kind of a skyrocket. It's a full 50% hike. It's going from $60 to $90. Considering how steep that increase is, do you foresee them hiking up prices as rapidly and frequently as ESPN used to? Because ESPN at first was doing it like every 2 years, and then it went to 18 months. And I think towards the end, it was like between 13 and 15 months. Every 13 and 15 months, they were jacking up the price. Do you see that happening with Paramount?
Well, I mean, both for ESPN Plus and Paramount, you got to remember that UFC is not the only content that they're paying a lot for. And we've got to, I guess you have to look at what their plan is overall. I'm guessing because of how much they paid the UFC, how much they're paying for South Park, how much they're paying for all these other properties, that we will see a rapid increase in the price for Paramount, because otherwise they're going to be seeing losses every year. Now, they might accept that at first, because if they get tons of growth, if they can get tons of growth in subscriptions, then they do not have to increase the price as much, because you have so many subscribers, you can start making more in your advertising, things like that. But if they do not see a massive increase in subscribers, I would not be shocked if we see bigger increases in the price. But either way, I think there's definitely going to be an increase in the price, because they are spending so much on their content, not just the UFC, but UFC is a big part of that. So I would not, right now it's part of the package, but at the same, another possibility, they haven't said anything about this, but would I be shocked in 2 years' time if they decided to add another tier for the pay-per-views? Now, that might blow up in their faces, because everybody's now signed on to Paramount thinking they get the numbered events with the normal subscription, and so there might be a big a pushback, and then they'd see numbers plummet because of that if you angered the fan base. But at the same time, they're like, if these were people are coming for. Maybe we add another tier for special events, which would be the number of events, or maybe a handful of number of events per year. You have to pay another tier, basically go back to a pay-per-view model in that case. I would not be shocked if that happens, but that's all conjecture on my part. We got to wait and see how the year unfolds. But just like ESPN Plus, I am right now under the opinion that every year we are going to see a steep increase.
So we are pondering, if I'm to understand you about the extra tier, we are pondering the DAZN approach.
Yeah, well, I don't think they'll go that far, because DAZN is a disastrous approach. That is just that. But oh my God, if they did the DAZN approach, that would anger a lot of people. That would tremendously anger a lot of people. But I could imagine, now that's not to say they'll do this, but I could imagine they start saying, okay, we put all of our stuff on Paramount for this one price, and we're not bringing in the revenue we were hoping, the number of subscribers. Now, we can't put all of our number of events behind an extra paywall, because we will have outrage from this fan base that signed on thinking they get it all. But what if we took all of our big events and we kind of stacked 4 events per year that were bigger than the rest? And those 4 you had to pay a premium to get. And that way we could separate, we could add a tier where we could recoup some of our money and make extra money off these 4 big events, something like, or 6 big events or whatever that were bigger the rest of the year. And that way we could introduce an extra pay level to bring some extra revenue in. I could see something like that. But again, that's just me, spitballing here. We'll have to wait and see, because if they get tons of subscribers, it's possible there's very little price increase comes in Paramount.
Dana White did say, he went on record saying that he wasn't going to completely rule out pay-per-view, that it might not be completely dead for the UFC. He did say that.
Yeah, and I would take in a book from an old pro wrestling gimmick. If people know, I'm an AWA guy, American Wrestling Association, from the Twin Cities. And one of the best gimmicks they ever did was when Hulk Hogan was challenging for the heavyweight title against the greatest wrestler of all time, Nick Bockwinkel. And Nick Bockwinkel, as they said in the gimmick, was Nick Bockwinkel refused the match unless they paid him a ton of money. And because Nick Bockwinkel was charging so much, the promotion was forced to, Vern Gagne was forced to increase the ticket prices and charge for the people to go to the neighboring arena to watch on closed circuits. They had a closed circuit event, so they could generate the revenue, and they had to charge these premium prices for this event. So they blamed it on Nick Bockwinkel, and none of the fans that I remembered blamed Vern or the promotion. They all blamed Nick for being so greedy. Could you imagine if the UFC wanted to do that, introduce this new pay tier and say, oh, it said greedy John Jones or the greedy Conor McGregor or someone like that. They're the one that's the reason we have to add this extra pay tier, because this premium event, this guy is asking for too much money.
Let's talk about pay-per-views a little bit more, because Canadian sports fans, at least some of them, I'm not sure if it's all Canadian sports fans, but at least a pretty significant swathe of them will have to still pay for UFC events as pay-per-views. Why is that?
Well, that's because they signed a deal, I think in 2024, I'm not sure the exact date, but 2024 with Sportsnet, which is I think Rogers Media or whatever owns them in Canada. I'm not super familiar with the Canada media companies. I'm going from memory. But they signed a deal with Sportsnet, and Sportsnet's part of their deal was we get to be the exclusive pay-per-view provider, and they're still part of that contract with them. So looking that up, I didn't see any date they have like a duration of that contract. It was just a multi-year deal. So it's going to run through at least 2026, maybe longer. And so Canada's stuck with that until at least that deal runs out. And then the question is, will Paramount pick them up in Canada and offer the same deal? Will someone else do that? Or will someone else again offer a contract with the UFC where it's pay-per-view again? So Canada, they do not have any, not only are they stuck with pay-per-view, there's no knowledge for the fans there if in the future they will not have to buy pay-per-views.
All right. Will there be some change like at some point where they can also just pay one subscription price?
I imagine that because Canada and the US are so close, that if they're offering the American fan base a one subscription rate or per month to get everything, that Canadians are going to expect the same. And so that the next deal will be very similar. That's what I expect, but you never know for sure. And again, if using the DAZN model, I mean, they just might look at Canada like you are, second tier to you, or we are just a cash cow. We are just going to bleed you guys dry. So there's always that possibility. Who knows what they're thinking? Maybe they think that Paramount has no interest in owning the Canadian rights, that they'll continue the pay-per-views there. I mean, I have no clue what the future holds in that direction, but I have to guess, because the Americans are going to get it basically free with their subscription, no additional price. I shouldn't say free, no additional price for the numbered events, that within the next contract, that Canada goes the same, because I just, nothing would turn off fans more, I imagine, than we are being charged that much more than the U.S. fans.
Were you surprised that I'm going to go off script for just one single question? Were you surprised that the Paramount Plus subscription was going to go from $60 to $90?
No, not actually. I was, I thought it was going to be $10 a month. I thought it'd be $120. So I'm pleasantly surprised. It's, fans, here's the weird thing. Fans should be ecstatic, because for the first time, the sport has gotten cheaper, right?
Yeah.
It's reversed. And here's the other weird thing. Now, there's a thing called SNP, where for antitrust, for an analysis of, if someone's violating antitrust law, if the price of a product goes up like 15% a year or something like that. And almost every year, the UFC product has gone up that. We've seen price increases around, every year to 10 to 15%, which is like, okay, that seems to indicate some sort of market power, that they can increase prices that much and the fan base still buys it. But this is the first time where actually you've seen a drastic reduction in their prices. Yeah. So I'm waiting to see if they introduce that in their filings, if they bring that as evidence that like, oh, we do not have market power, because look how much our prices have decreased, because the vast competition we are getting from Combate Global and PFL and One Championship has forced us to bring these prices down. But I'm being a little, obviously being more than a little sarcastic there. But the truth is, this is, great news for fans. I guess the one bad news is it comes on the heels of if you were a, let's say, liberal fan, and I imagine that more of our listeners are probably on the liberal side of the spectrum. If you're on the left side of the spectrum, the prices have gone down as the UFC becomes more of a right-wing product, as they've been out there promoting the Trump administration, helping him get elected, as they continue with their monopsony abuses, if that bugs you, as they now turn to being a company that seems to be based almost exclusively on degenerate gambling and gambleaholics in this country, and using them, that as they're doing all those things, it's like, well, the UFC becomes more worse to some people personally, to their own moral center, they've gotten cheaper. So you have that to weigh against each other.
Now, you mentioned gambling, and I just have one quick question about Polymarket, because I saw you quote a post on Twitter about online gambling. The guy was talking about how online gambling was destroying young men in America. So I want you to kind of remind our listeners, the ones that may have missed last week's show, how much of an impact on sports gambling that the UFC specifically will have with Polymarket.
Well, I mean, Polymarket technically is not gambling, but even though it is, we all know it is. What Polymarket gets away with is that they claim it is a trade, that they are just a platform and two parties are engaging in a commodities trade. And so it doesn't have to have the regulation sports gambling has. But this is one thing I can say I've changed my opinion on, because I was much more libertarian about sports gambling, more agnostic. I was never like a huge fan of it, but more agnostic of sports gambling 10 years ago, before we made it ubiquitous on everything. And now I've seen, like, I can really tell that this is terrible, because I know so many parents and their kids that they find out that their kid has just, bankrupted himself at a young age because he can't quit gambling. Now, it's good that they're not doing the drugs they did when I was a kid. They're not drinking like I did when I was a kid. They're not, I think the evidence is bad that some parents might look at it as good that the kids aren't having as much sex, but it also could be bad because they're sitting at home gambling lonely. So there's all these positives with youth, but there's also this new danger that we've introduced, and that's sports gambling. And it's not just youth. It's, it just seems to impact just men in general. Just everybody I know is just really into, not everybody, but large numbers of people have gotten really into gambling and gambling everything. And when you talk to them, a few are good at it, but the truth is the vast majority end up losing more than they win. And so where I used to be agnostic about this, I've now become a little more negative. Now, I'm not saying we should ban it, make it completely illegal. We don't need to go back to the sports bookie days of the 20s and 30s when they had the policy, the numbers. But I would like to see just get rid of the advertising, the direct advertising we do to people during sports events I think is just terrible. We banned alcohol advertising in the past. We banned cigarette advertising. I don't know why we can't legalize sports gambling and not have the direct advertising to the event. And this gets us into combat sports, which is probably one of the most absurd versions of sports betting, is that as you're watching the event, the live odds, the link, the where to place your bets appear on the screen. And it's like, this is just why not just, if you're why not do a show for heroin addicts and have a direct pipeline to where they can get their dealer, right? That's what we're doing with sports gambling. And the UFC specifically is probably the best at this, because the UFC is this massive product compared to any other fight promotion. They get a much bigger audience. And so if you have a much bigger audience and you're advertising sports betting, guess what? You have much more traffic, on the sports betting, giving gamblers more opportunity to place more bets, and also to cheat more because there's more money coming in. They also, because that they have this bigger audience and then they can get more gambling audience in it, they can draw a bigger audience watching the events, which increases their value. And so that might be one of the reasons why that they got such a big deal from Paramount. And so they're getting more money from the broadcaster because they're drawing an audience of degenerate gamblers that have to watch this event. They can, because they have the audience of degenerate gamblers, they can charge Polymarket and FanDuel or whoever, DraftKings, whatever, massive amounts of money, tens of millions per year, more than any other sponsor, to be sponsors of the UFC. So right there indicates why I don't think the UFC is ever going to try to put this genie back in the bottle, right? Because the amount of revenue that they're generating, how much of the audience they are probably generating in traffic to watch the events. So the second order amounts of revenue that's being generated are too great for them ever to turn against it. They are fully into the sports betting world. And you can see how important it's gotten, because look at how PFL the last couple of years, their sales pitch has been. Remember, their whole thing for PFL is how we're going to integrate the events with gambling. And so combat sports, especially MMA, because, and this goes, their whole discussions how in boxing, there's a lot of promoters spend their time trying to build up a fighter because they have to get ranked by a sanctioned organization, which they have no control over or little influence over compared to like MMA promotions, and then build him up so he can be as a contender and challenger, because then the audience will be interested, they can make more revenue. In MMA, the promotions control that, and so the fan base basically is drawn in to the promotional walled garden. And so you can actually make more parity matches. You don't have to build a fighter up. There's less interest for a promoter to build a fighter, because in MMA you own both sides, the A and the B, and there's no need to develop a fighter because you control the rankings. So when they move up, whoever wins. You don't need to like kind of protect your fighter and develop them. You end result, you always get whoever won the match. And so they can have more parity, right? They can have more fighters that are probably not as talented on the broadcast, because they'll put on exciting fights. Where in boxing, again, you're focused more on the guy that's going to move to the top, and so that makes more one-sided fights. And so you have this more parity, which makes better product to watch, yes, but also a better product to gamble on. And so MMA has really become built around gambling more so than even what boxing used to be. In boxing, I mean, you probably have to go back to boxing of the early 20th century for the amount of gambling that's now centered on MMA. That's how important it's become part of MMA. So, I am firmly against gambling, and I would love that if MMA, the UFC and MMA promotions would take a step back, but it's now become the primary. Not the primary, I guess the TV broadcast rights still are the most important, but the second or third major source of revenue, which means it's, on a profit margins basis, it might be the number one thing driving additional profit margins of all the revenue sources. So they are not going to do anything to tackle it.
You talked about how they're getting younger and younger, these young men, teenagers, boys, what have you, that are sitting home gambling and stuff like that. And it struck me that with this regime, two things could happen from that, especially if all of the rumblings of a possible third term, or the passing of the reins to like-minded people of this regime. Two things could happen from that. You have debtor's prison, and they seem to love prison systems and things like that because the third-party prisons pay a lot. And then the other thing is indentured servitude. You've got these young men that are racking up gambling debt and everything. What a way to, hook somebody in and have them work off their debt.
I mean, we don't really have to reintroduce indentured servitude, because you just have to get rid of like certain bankruptcy laws. And so if people can't get rid of their debt, they're stuck working for it. But I don't know. I mean, I think there's plenty of bad stuff without me coming up with new versions of bad stuff. But I think the number one problem, I think, is that there's so much money made by this gambling. And we saw it too with other speculative markets. Look at Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. There was some attempt to regulate it because it's an extremely speculative market. People out there might be fans of it. I know MMA fighters are huge fans of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, but I mean, it's just it's not a real currency. It's an asset. It's a created asset, and you generally have some sort of regulation to prevent it screwing up the rest of the markets. And yet, any politician, I think the primary example is Sherrod Brown, who did anything on regulation, they were met with tens, hundreds of millions of dollars spent against them by cryptocurrency PACs and funds. And so that's just one example that there is so much money from gambling that and our election laws are and campaign finance laws are. I do not know if anybody can even campaign against reining it in until we reach a point where just the general public can no longer take it anymore. And maybe that'll happen, but I'm not sure. I think even beyond Trump, beyond the current Republican administration, who are much more pro, these sort of business practices are allowed. I am not certain any president or any administration in the future, maybe they will, but I'm not certain any future administration will, because they saw kind of what happened to the few politicians, namely people in the Biden administration, their Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and the FTC, SEC, and how hard they went after them, and the select few politicians that tried to rein in those industries. They saw how bad they went after them. I imagine everybody in even on the Democrat side is turning into a Matthew Iglesias, and like, hey, let's just turn a blind eye and collect some campaign donations from these guys.
We do need to move on here, so we are going to turn our attention to LFA because they recently announced to signing a deal with Vice TV to air over there. Now, my question to you is, that platform, is it large enough to provide any real lifeline for them, or are they just sort of delaying their own, I won't say demise, but kind of demise with this deal? Because it seems like everybody's sort of coming apart at the seams.
Well, I mean, I agree. Rob Nashville again. Rob Joyner, we'll give him another shout out. We gotta have to limit how many times we can shout him out per episode, though. But this will be another shout out for him. He had a great point. I think everybody's like, oh, this is a sign that, LFA, I can't believe they signed with the Vice. That's just terrible. But they're kind of a regional, small tier B league MMA promotion. What markets are there? What broadcast platforms are available to them? What audience is there? It's just a microscopic audience is available. Now, Fight Pass probably has the most eyeballs because people tuning into Fight Pass are familiar with the sport. That's why they specifically tune in. It's a built-in audience. Who knows what the future of Fight Pass holds? But also apparently was, they were offering deals to LFA. LFA didn't like, and so Vice, is it Paramount? No. Is it Warner Brothers? No. Is it Netflix? No, it's nothing. It's not even 1, 2, 3 tiers below that. It's much more below that. But it is a platform, and if they're building a kind of a fight combat sports platform, it can maybe draw other eyeballs. It's enough to at least get them out there. And so I'm just not sure if they can expect anything better than that.
Are there any other outlets that could throw a lifeline?
I mean, DAZN, but DAZN's paying nothing. As we've talked about before, DAZN literally pays some boxing promoters, from what I understand, like $1. Which sounds absurd, but really just like, we are going to air your product for free. We'll give $1 to show that there's some sort of transaction. Do you think
Top Rank could end up on Vice?
It's possible. Now, Top Rank's different. LFA, that's not bad. Top Rank, though, if Top Rank ends up on Vice, that is a massive step down. Massive for them, because not only do they need revenue, and I don't know how much Vice could pay, they need a platform that can get eyeballs to build up fighters. And if they're on Vice, I would question their future if that was the case.
Mm-hmm. PFL, let's talk about them real quick, because their former CEO, Peter Murray, is out. And additionally, several longtime key employees have been laid off. What do you make of that?
Well, I'm not surprised. I mean, I think a lot of people overestimate, and it's not quite their fault too. I think PFL has exaggerated their success as well under Don Davis. We're the duopoly, we're the co-leader, all these things, when they're, you're this is like the day Stacey
thing gets me every time you say it. It makes me laugh.
It's in some ways, this is like when Stacey King bragged about him and Michael Jordan scoring 76 points in one game. Just don't ask him who scored what, but it's like that. Yes, you two are the two leaders in MMA, probably the two biggest promotions. One though still much, much bigger. And so in many ways, I think he was checked out a while ago. Again, God, I'm not going to Rob Joyner again. God, go check out his Twitter handle, Rob Nashville. He has a lot of good stuff on there. But going to give him another shout out here because he does have some very good information on this, or some good analysis on this. And that is that, Peter Murray was probably, he was already shopping his resume a while ago. And so my thinking is he basically was already checked out or, moved out of the company. But instead of making it look like, oh, we're firing an executive or things are going badly, let's move him to PFL Africa, somewhere he's kind of not dealing with the regular promotion, just a symbolic position. And that way, down the line, we can get rid of him, but not make it look like we replaced him immediately, right? And so I think that's what happened there. So PFL, I think this is what it is that they brought in the new guy. He is there to get them a TV deal. That's his purpose. That's what they brought him in for, to at least give them the appearance that they have a good TV product. To get this new TV product is the number one goal, to get them a deal with ESPN or someone else domestically, because that's their lot. They have a lot riding on it. They need a big TV deal to kind of make the venture work for what investors put money in for. I'm not certain they'll get that big TV deal, but that's their entire goal right now, is to try to shoot for that TV deal. And they are cutting corners, I think, on everything else. They're scaling back because they put a lot of money at first into trying to look like a property that's as a competitor to the UFC. It didn't work, but there's only so long you can do that because that burns through a lot of cash. My understanding is the year before that they acquired Bellator, they burned through like $50 million. And, they can talk about how they're, approaching 100 million in revenue. I don't think they do the book. They don't do the accounting practices to the degree that one championship does. But I do believe there is probably a bunch of barters and other financial shenanigans. I guess I'll use that term again, shenanigans, that are in there that boost up their revenue more than it really is. I don't think, the word has been out for a while, and we know from one of their lenders' presentations that their TV deal on ESPN probably pays them around $10 million a year. That is not a massive amount of money. So how much more revenue beyond that could you generate? I'm thinking not a ton more. No, I don't think not 90 million more. I don't think that's possible. So to get you to 100 million, you have to generate 90 million from other revenue sources on top of your domestic. And so they are cutting corners, trying to save some money. And again, that brings up, perhaps that has to do with why Ngannou hasn't fought. I'm not certain yet, but as we know last time, it sounds like the Saudis paid for most of the Ngannou's first bout. So they've been trying to get the Saudis to sign off on another bout. And so, again, they're cutting costs, looking for a big TV deal, and they brought in executives, made changes to do that, and we'll see if they will. But I got a feeling they will. Whatever new deal they get will not be the massive deal. When I say massive, I mean like close to 100 million a year, or anywhere in proximity to that they were somewhat counting on.
So we are going to move on here to our promised topic, and that is we have some documents from a Brazilian court case involving former UFC fighter Taila Santos and her manager Marcelo Brigadeiro. Can you tell us more about the case and what the documents we will be looking at are?
Listeners of the show might remember this case. This case actually was ongoing for several years, and we had covered it before. In fact, when we covered Taila Santos's contract a while ago, remember the UFC contracts we did? That was from this case. And in the case, she was suing her former agent, Marcelo, and she had a bunch of accusations of breach of contract. And the case was decided in the spring. The judge concluded there was no breach of contract on the part of the defendant, her agent. And I want to give a shout out really quick because this case we are aware of the details, because of Elton Costa, who is a Brazilian attorney and reporter who covered the case before and has done stuff about the UFC antitrust case. So if you want to follow Portuguese Brazilian reporting, I highly recommend you follow him. But that's the background. That's the case that we got right now. That's what we're going to be looking at.
All right. So from here, folks, everything from here is going to be behind the paywall. We wanted to give you a little taste of what's going to happen, but we're also going to be talking about WhatsApp messages in our paywall section. So this would be a good time for you to pony up a little bit of coin, because we're really, really inexpensive. It's cheap to subscribe to us. So pony up a little bit of coin and stick those in our jukebox and get all the music here about these amazing text messages that were sent on the WhatsApp application. All right. So to access the bonus content of this episode, you must be a paid subscriber. To do that, go to heynottheface.substack.com and subscribe today.
Ow! Ow! Not the face! Ooh! Ooh! Okay, the face!